Imagine holding your daughter in your arms while her dead body lies in the next room. This isn't just a nightmare. It's what happened in Blackwood. It was just a normal Saturday afternoon, until it wasn't. A local garage sale, a pile of old toys, and two dolls that looked just a little too real. They were sitting in a dusty box, tucked away in a dark corner. 9-year-old Lily saw them, and she couldn't look away. One had a knitted sweater, the other wore a faded white dress. Their eyes, those cold, glass eyes, seemed to follow her every move. Her parents bought them for $5. $5 for a lifetime of regret. At first, it was small things. Lily started whispering in her room, not to her friends, and not to herself. She was talking to the dolls. Her parents thought it was cute. A child's imagination. Right, wrong. Then, the faces changed. Lily claimed the dolls were smiling at her, but not a happy smile. It was a wide, jagged, hungry grin. Her parents laughed it off. Just shadows, they said. Just the light playing tricks on her eyes. But then, the voices started. Not just whispers, but commands. One night, the house went silent. A heavy, suffocating silence. Lily stood in the kitchen, alone. The moonlight hit the blade of a large silver knife. Her small hands were shaking, but her eyes were empty. The dolls had told her what to do. They told her she had no choice. Kill them, or we kill you. She walked, slowly, toward her parents' bedroom. Each step sounded like a heartbeat against the floorboards. Thump, thump, thump. She reached the bed. She stood over her mother, the woman she loved, the woman who tucked her in every night. Her mother opened her eyes. She saw her daughter standing there. "Honey, did you have another nightmare?" her mother whispered. Lily didn't say a word. She just climbed into the bed. She lay down between her parents, cold, stiff, like a corpse. She felt her father's arm around her. She felt her mother's warmth. And then, she lifted the knife. She pressed the cold steel against her mother's throat. A second more, and it would have been over. But her father moved. He felt the metal. He grabbed Lily's wrist just in time. "Lily, what are you doing?" he screamed. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just pointed toward her bedroom. Her voice was a flat, hollow monotone. "They told me to. They said they would hurt me." Her father was trembling. He didn't understand. He thought his daughter was having a breakdown, a psychotic break. He told his wife to call the police, and then he ran to Lily's room. He wanted to see those dolls. He wanted to throw them into the fire. He burst through the door, breathing hard. The room was freezing. Cold air swirled around him like a winter storm. He looked at the bed. The two dolls were sitting there. They were upright, and in their tiny, plastic hands, they held the exact same knife Lily had in the other room. But that wasn't the worst part. No, the nightmare was just beginning. He looked down at the floor, and his heart stopped. His blood turned to ice. There, lying next to the bed, was a body. A small, bloody, lifeless body. It was Lily. His daughter was dead. She had been dead for hours. The father's head began to spin. He looked back at the dolls. They were staring at him. And then, they started to la couche, a high-pitched, tinny, mechanical sound. If Lily was dead in this room, then WHO was standing in the other room with his wife. He heard a scream from the master bedroom, a scream that cut through the night like a jagged razor. He ran faster than he ever had in his life. He burst back into his own room. But it was too late. The girl who looked like Lily was gone. The bed was empty. Only his wife remained, clutching her throat, staring at the window. She just vanished. His wife sobbed. The police arrived minutes later. They found the body in the nursery. They found the father holding his head, screaming about dolls. They found the knives. But the dolls? They were gone. No trace of them. No footprints. No evidence. Just a grieving family. And a mystery that would haunt the town of Blackwood for the next 20 years. The case was closed. But the story was far from over. Because those dolls, They don't just disappear. They wait. They hide. And they look for a new home. 20 years passed. The house was boarded up. It became a graveyard for memories. Until a new couple saw the for sale sign. They wanted a fresh start. They wanted a beautiful, old, historic home. They had no idea that the house already had owners. Owners who had been waiting in the dark, in the dust, for someone to play with. The crates were being moved in. The boxes were being unpacked. And there, at the bottom of a forgotten closet, 2 pairs of glass eyes opened. The Blackwood Twins were back. And this time, they were hungry. 20 years is a long time for a grudge to fester. The Blackwood house stood like a rotting tooth in the middle of a silent street. No one dared to touch it. No one dared to breathe its name. Until Mark and Sarah pulled up in their moving truck. They were young. They were ambitious. They saw a fixer-upper, a bargain, a dream home. They didn't see the blood soaked into the floorboards. They didn't see the shadows that moved when the lights went out. Mark was a man of logic, tools, wood, nails. If it was broken, he could fix it. Sarah was the dreamer. She loved the history. She loved the vintage charm. On their first night, the house felt wrong. The air was thick. It smelled like old dust and something metallic like pennies or dried blood. Just old house smell, Mark said. He tried to laugh, but the laugh died in his throat. He was down in the basement, tearing away the moldy drywall. The hammer swung. Crack, the wall crumbled. And there, behind the furnace, was a hidden crawl space. A small wooden box was tucked inside. It was wrapped in rusted chains, heavy, ancient chains. Mark grabbed his bolt cutters. Snip. The metal hit the concrete with a loud, echoing clang. He opened the lid. The hinges screamed. And inside, 2 dolls were staring up at him. They weren't dusty. They weren't broken. They looked brand new. The knitted sweater was bright. The white dress was pristine. Their glass eyes caught the dim yellow light of the basement bulb. Mark felt a wave of nausea, a sudden, sharp, stabbing pain in his temples. "Sarah, come look at this," he shouted. Sarah ran down the stairs. She saw the dolls. She froze. Her breath hitched in her chest. "Mark, put them back, right now." "Why, they're just antiques." "Sarah, we can sell these for a couple $100. Mark reached out. He touched the doll in the sweater. The room went ice cold. The light bulb overhead flickered once, twice, and then shattered. Darkness, absolute, suffocating, pitch black darkness. Mark, where are you?" Sarah's voice was trembling. She heard a sound, a small rhythmic tapping, tap, 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 like tiny plastic fingers on a wooden table. "I'm right here." Mark's voice came from the corner, but it sounded different. It was deeper, hollow, like he was speaking through a long, metal pipe. Sarah pulled out her phone. She turned on the flashlight. The beam cut through the dark. She aimed it at the corner. Mark was standing there, but he wasn't looking at her. He was staring at the dolls. And the dolls, they were standing on the workbench, by themselves. "They're hungry, Sarah," Mark whispered. He didn't blink. He didn't move. "They haven't eaten in 20 years. Mark, stop it. You're scaring me." Sarah grabbed his arm. His skin felt like marble, cold, hard, dead. Suddenly, the basement door slammed shut. The sound of the bolts sliding into place echoed through the room. They were trapped. Sarah turned her light back to the workbench. The dolls were gone. She swung the light around the room, fast, panicked. She hit the corner. Nothing. She hit the stairs. Nothing. Then, she aimed the light at the ceiling. They were there, clinging to the wooden beams like spiders. Their small, plastic limbs moved with a sickening, jerky, mechanical motion. Their heads turned 180 degrees until they were looking straight down at her. "Play with us," the dolls whispered in unison. The voice didn't come from their mouths. It came from the walls. Mark began to giggle, a high-pitched, childish giggle that didn't belong to a grown man. He looked at Sarah, and his eyes were gone, just black, empty, hollow pits. "Mark, please." Sarah backed away. She tripped over a pile of old wood. She fell hard. Her phone skittered across the floor. The light aimed toward the far corner, under the old pipes. Sarah's heart stopped. She saw a hand, a pale, slender, familiar hand. It was wearing a wedding ring. Her wedding ring? She looked at her own hand. The ring was there. She looked at the hand under the pipes again. She crawled toward it, gasping for air. She pushed aside a heavy tarp. There she was, Sarah, lying there, eyes wide, skin blue, her throat torn open. She had been dead for hours. The realization hit her like a physical blow. If she was dead, then who was she? She looked down at her hands. They began to turn pale. Her skin began to crack like porcelain. The thing that looked like Sarah turned to the thing that looked like Mark. They stood there, two hollow shells, staring at each other in the dark. And from the shadows, the dolls climbed down. They walked toward their new bodies, their new, beautiful, human puppets. "This house is much better than the last one," the doll in the white dress said. "Yes," the doll in the sweater replied. "More rooms to hide in, more neighbors to visit." The two humans walked to the basement door. They unlocked it. They walked up the stairs, perfectly in sync. They walked into the kitchen and poured 2 glasses of wine. They sat at the table and smiled at the moonlight. From the outside, they looked like the perfect couple. But inside, there was only cotton and plastic and hate. The harvest of Blackwood had begun again. And the town had no idea what was coming for them. The neighborhood of Blackwood was quiet, too quiet. The streetlights flickered over manicured lawns and silent cars. Everyone was tucked away in their beds, dreaming of tomorrow. They had no idea that the house on the corner was no longer a home. It was a nest. Inside, the things that looked like Mark and Sarah sat perfectly still. They didn't eat. They didn't sleep. They just waited. The dolls sat on the velvet sofa, their glass eyes reflecting the moon. The woman next door, the doll in the sweater, whispered, "The one with the golden hair. She saw us through the window. Then she must be invited to the game." The doll in the white dress replied. Next door, Mrs. Gable was sitting in her kitchen. She was an old woman, a widow who noticed everything. She had seen Mark and Sarah move in, but something felt off. They moved too smoothly. They stood too still. And their smiles, they reminded her of something from a nightmare she had 40 years ago. Suddenly, a knock at the door. Knock, knock, knock. Mrs. Gable looked at the clock. It was 2:15 a.m. Who would be out this late? She walked to the door, her heart thumping against her ribs. She peeked through the eye hole. It was Sarah. She was standing on the porch, bathed in the pale yellow light. She was wearing a white nightgown, and she was holding a gift, a small wooden box. "Mrs. Gable," Sarah's voice was sweet, but it had a strange, metallic vibration. "We brought you a housewarming gift. We couldn't sleep, and we wanted to be neighborly." Mrs. Gable hesitated. Every instinct in her body told her to run, to lock the bolt, to hide in the cellar. But she was an old-fashioned woman. She opened the door. "It's very late, dear," Mrs. Gable said, her voice shaking. Sarah stepped inside, without being invited. She didn't walk. She glided. She placed the box on the kitchen table. "Open it," Sarah whispered. "It's a family heirloom. We want you to have it." Mrs. Gable reached for the lid. Her fingers were trembling. She lifted the wood, and her breath caught. Inside the box was a heart. A human heart. It was still warm. Mrs. Gable screamed, but no sound came out. She looked up at Sarah, but Sarah's face was melting. The skin was peeling back like wet wallpaper, revealing the white, cracked porcelain underneath. "Do you like it?" "The thing that wasn't," Sarah asked. "It belonged to the man who lived here before. He was delicious." From the shadows of the hallway, Mark stepped out. But he wasn't alone. He was holding the two dolls by their tiny, plastic hands. The doll in the sweater looked at Mrs. Gable, its jaw dropped open, wider than any human mouth. 3 is a crowd, it hissed, but 4 is a party. Mark moved with lightning speed. He grabbed Mrs. Gable by the throat. His grip wasn't like flesh and bone. It was like cold, industrial steel. He lifted her off the floor as if she weighed nothing. The dolls began to scramble up Mrs. Gable's legs. Their plastic feet made a sickening, scratching sound against her skin. Scritch, scritch, scritch. They reached her shoulders. They leaned into her ears. "Don't worry," the doll in the white dress whispered. "We're going to give you a new face. A face that never ages. A face that never cries." The last thing Mrs. Gable saw was the silver flash of a kitchen knife. The same knife from 20 years ago. The same knife that never stayed clean for long. The next morning, the sun rose over Blackwood. The birds were singing. The mailman made his rounds. He saw Mrs. Gable standing in her front garden, pruning her roses. She was wearing her favorite floral dress. She looked younger. Her skin was flawless. Her smile was wide and perfectly still. "Morning, Mrs. Gable." The mailman waved. Mrs. Gable didn't turn her head. She just waved back. Her arm moved in a stiff, jerky, mechanical motion. Snap, pop, snap. "Beautiful day, isn't it?" she said. Her voice sounded like 2 pieces of sandpaper rubbing together. The mailman felt a chill. Despite the morning sun, he didn't linger. He hurried to the next house, back inside the Blackwood house. The dolls sat at the window, watching the street. 2 houses down. 3 more to go. "The neighborhood is growing," the doll in the sweater said. "Yes," the other replied. "Soon, the whole town will be beautiful." They looked at the camera, their glass eyes staring directly into your soul. "Are you home?" they whispered. "Because we're coming to your street next." The silence in Blackwood was no longer peaceful. It was deadly. The street was full of people. But something was wrong. The postman noticed it. First, Mrs. Gable didn't blink. Not once. The milkman noticed it next. The Miller family, all 4 of them, were sitting on their porch, staring at the sun, perfectly still. Their skin looked like polished marble. Their hair didn't move in the wind. They looked like mannequins. Inside the Blackwood house, the dolls were celebrating. The table was set for a feast. But there was no food, only glass, porcelain, and cold steel. The doll in the sweater looked at the window. "The town is almost perfect," it hissed. "No more crying, no more bleeding, just silence." But there was one house that wasn't silent. The house at the end of the block. The home of Sheriff Miller. Sheriff Miller was a man of the OLD school. He didn't believe in ghosts. He didn't believe in curses. But he knew how to smell a lie. And the town of Blackwood was smelling like a massive, rotting lie. He sat in his patrol car, watching the street. He saw Mark and Sarah walking toward the grocery store. They walked in swine C left foot. Right foot, snap, left foot. Right foot, snap. Something is wrong with those 2. Miller whispered to himself. He gripped his steering wheel. His knuckles were white. He decided to follow them. He followed them into the store. The lights were humming, a low, buzzing sound that made his teeth ache. He saw the cashier. It was young Billy. Billy was usually a talkative kid. But today, Billy was standing behind the register, staring at a wall. His skin was pale. His eyes were wide and black. "Billy, you okay, son?" Miller asked. Billy didn't turn his head. He just moved his arm. Creak, pop, creak. He scanned a loaf of bread, but there was no bread. He was scanning the air. "The harvest is ready, Sheriff," Billy said. His voice was a hollow, tinny echo. "Would you like to join the collection?" Miller backed away. He felt a cold sweat breaking out on his neck. He turned around to leave, but Mark and Sarah were standing in the aisle, blocking his path. Their faces were cracking. Pieces of flesh were falling off, revealing the white, hard porcelain underneath. "You have a very strong heart, Sheriff," Sarah whispered, her jaw unhinged. dropping down to her chest. The dolls. They want to see it. They want to hold it. Miller reached for his gun. He pulled it out, his hand shaking. Stay back. I'm warning you. Mark just laughed. It wasn't a man's laugh. It was the laugh of a child. Bullets don't hurt when you're made of stuffing. He giggled. Suddenly, the lights in the store went out. Shatter. Every bulb exploded at once. Miller clicked on his flashlight. The beam hit the floor. He saw them. The two dolls. They were sitting on a pile of canned goods. The doll in the sweater was holding a small, yellowed, child's drawing. It was a picture of a sheriff, lying in a coffin. We've been waiting for a man of law, the doll in the white dress said. Laws are so rigid, just like us. The dolls began to run. They didn't run like children. They scurried like huge, wooden cockroaches, across the floor, up the shelves, along the ceiling. Miller fired. Bang, bang, bang. The bullets hit the dolls, but they didn't stop. They just left small, black holes in their knitted sweaters. No blood, no pain, only the sound of hollow plastic impact. Miller ran for the exit. He burst through the glass doors, his lungs burning. He scrambled into his car and floored it. He didn't look back. If he had, he would have seen the whole town standing. In the middle of the road, Mrs. Gable, Billy the Millers, all of them, waving. Stiff, mechanical, waving. He drove straight to the precinct. He grabbed the old files, the files from 20 years ago, the Blackwood murders. He looked at the photos of the crime scene. He saw the 9-year-old girl, Lily, and then he saw the detail he had missed before. In the background of the photo, sitting on the dresser, was a small, yellow notebook. He realized the truth. The dolls weren't just killing people. They were replacing them. They were building an army of puppets that would never die. He heard a sound behind him, patter, patter, patter. He turned around. The dolls were sitting on his desk. You're very smart, Sheriff. The doll in the sweater whispered, but you're too soft. You need to be hardened. The doll reached out a tiny, plastic hand. It touched Miller's forehead. Miller felt a wave of paralysis. His skin began to tighten. His joints began to lock. He tried to scream, but his jaw was turning to stone. He looked into the mirror on the wall. He saw his face. It was turning white, a smooth, shiny, porcelain white. Welcome to the family, the dolls whispered. The next morning, the sheriff's car was found abandoned, but the sheriff was back at his desk. He looked better than ever. No wrinkles. No gray hair, just a perfect glass stare. Blackwood was now a town of dolls, and they were looking at the map. They were looking at the next town over. They were looking at your town. The sun rose over Blackwood, but it was a sun that brought no warmth. The town was a ghost, inhabited by things that looked like people, but moved like machines. Every window had a pair of eyes watching. Every door was locked. From the outside, the dolls sat on the throne of the sheriff's desk. They were the kings now. The doll in the sweater looked at a map of the world. So many soft things, it hissed. So much messy blood, we must clean it. We must make it all shiny. But there was a flaw in their plan, a small forgotten detail deep in the basement of the original Blackwood house. Something was waking up. The real Lily. The dolls had stolen her life, but they couldn't steal her soul. For 20 years, she had been a shadow, trapped in the walls, fed by the darkness. And now, she had seen enough. The temperature in the precinct began to drop. The air turned sickly, poisonous, yellow. The dolls froze. Their glass eyes darted around the room. Who is there? The doll in the white dress demanded. The lights didn't flicker. They shattered. A figure emerged from the floorboards. It wasn't porcelain. It wasn't plastic. It was a cloud of black, jagged smoke. It had the shape of a 9-year-old girl, but her eyes were twin suns of rage. You took my family, the shadow whispered. The voice didn't come from a throat. It came from the Earth itself. The dolls tried to run. They scrambled up the walls. their plastic limbs clicking frantically, click-clack, click-clack, but the shadow was faster. Cold. Black tendrils wrapped around the doll in the sweater. It screamed, a sound like metal grinding against bone. The shadow pulled, and the doll's porcelain head cracked. The voice you selected does not support this language. Please click the upper right corner to switch to another voice. The other doll shrieked, "We are eternal. We are perfect. You are toys." Lily's shadow hissed. She slammed the dolls together. The impact sounded like a car crash. Porcelain shards flew across the room like shrapnel. The dolls began to melt. Their knitted clothes turned to ash. Their glass eyes rolled across the floor, turning to dust. As the dolls withered, the town began to change. In the grocery store, Billy collapsed. In the garden, Mrs. Gable fell over. All over Blackwood, the puppets fell. Their porcelain skin shattered, revealing nothing. No bodies, no bones, just empty, hollow shells. The things the dolls had created were gone, but the people they had replaced, they were gone too. Lily's shadow stood in the middle of the empty precinct. She looked at the map. She looked at the world that had forgotten her. She picked up a small, yellow crayon from the floor. She walked to the wall and drew a single, crude door. "It's time to go home," she whispered. The shadow faded. The yellow mist cleared, and Blackwood was finally truly silent. Days later, the military arrived. They found a town of empty clothes and shattered porcelain. They found no survivors. They found no bodies, except for one thing. In the center of the town square, they found a small wooden box. It was charred, burnt, and empty. But as the soldiers turned to leave, one of them heard a sound, a small, tinny, mechanical giggle. He looked down at his boot. Stuck in the tread was a single, tiny, glass eye. He picked it up. He looked into it, and for a split second, the eye blinked. The dolls weren't gone. They were just waiting for a new box. And somewhere, in a garage sale across the country, a mother is reaching for a dusty, knitted sweater.